Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Oxnard Live. I'm your host, Daniel Chavez Jr. Um, Apologize for the delay. We were having a little technical issues, but they seem to be okay, and then we're moving forward with it. Tonight is our second segment of our kind of a rendition of a little bit of a debate, but it's all in fun, called Viewpoint, where we take three topics in Oxnard, bring on two opposite viewpoints, and then have one discussion about it. Now, again, as we did last time, the point of it is not to force you to believe one way or another, but to give you a different perspective on the three topics. And our guests tonight are definitely two people that have opposite views on topics, and will definitely have an interesting conversation. And joining us tonight is Elidet, Bordon, and returning panelist Lucy Cartagena. Both of you guys, welcome. Lucy, welcome back. Elidet, welcome to the show. And Elidet, this is actually your third time being on Oxnard Live. You were part of our election night coverage. We actually had a one-on-one interview with you about supporting small businesses and how they can grow. And then now you're here again. And then Lucy, this is your third or fourth time. You were on here as a candidate, the panel, and this again. So yeah, three times. So either way, it's awesome that both of you guys are here joining me tonight. Lucy, I know Measure E is kind of a repeat from last time, but it's a little bit different. I want to ask, because a lot of people are concerned about Measure E, and they are asking, why isn't things changing? I believe a lot of people thought that after the November election, things were going to magically change and the city was going to be brand new or something. But I want to get your guys' opinion on this one thing. During the campaign season for Measure E, Oxnard City Manager Alex Nguyen said that the first quarter of Measure E tax would actually go into the reserves versus being utilized and to build up our reserves. Do you believe that that is the appropriate approach, or do you believe he should have already started spending that money on the large to-do list that we have in the city? So Lucy, we'll start with you on that one.
Okay, well, the first quarter to go into a reserve actually means going to the general fund. So unless he actually says this is earmarked money put aside just for Measure E, exactly where does that go to? Because we already know Measure E is already ambiguous. So where exactly does that go? To think that a quarter, if we're looking at a 40 million per year, so that's a quarter, you're looking at almost 10 plus million dollars going into a reserve or general fund. So I think one is he needs to be clear, is it earmarked money, and earmarked for what? Every time we get measures, it's never earmarked. So I think that right there in itself speaks volumes. So putting it into reserve without actually utilizing it right now, because like you said, people are waiting for immediate action. And immediate action means in homelessness, immediate action means in our streets, immediate action means in our infrastructure. So if we're not seeing immediate action until the second quarter, then we're already bombarded on top of what we're already looking at now. That's the whole reason why people pass the Measure E, to see change. So you're talking about now pushing back that change when in fact it's just going to be worse as opposed to better.
Elidet, what is your opinion on that? The approach that the city manager took to put the first quarter in reserves and then wait until actually September for funds to actually start being used.
Well, I agree with her that it wasn't earmarked. If there wasn't a way for the money to be spent and where it was going, that people are going to be wondering, why are we paying all this tax for nothing? I also think that we're talking about a large amount of money, and with COVID hitting, who could have foreseen that at this time and the way that it hit? I think it would also be kind of, it wouldn't be the smart strategy to just kind of put it out there at the same time. It's kind of like, we recently had, last year we had a windfall of some money, and my husband and I didn't spend it right away, right? Like we're like, okay, where is the best way to put this? Measure E had a lot of community input that target like the homelessness, youth programs, local infrastructure, parks, stuff like that. And that was all what the community wanted. 10 million, when it comes down to it, it seems like a lot, but it's not going to be able to cover all those things that the city needs. And at this point, I think it is important to kind of see the money that's coming in and where we're going to have to prioritize that money. Measure E is not going to be money that's spent without the people knowing about it. It's public information where that money is going. So it's not like it's hidden information. But I do think that it's important to not be so, not go out basically on a spending spree, kind of like the lottery winners that win money and then they're broke, you know, a few years later. We don't want to be that either. I know a lot of people are going to go back to, well, previous, you know, city council has a history of mismanaging funds and all of that. And that's one of the arguments I keep hearing. We do have a new city council, and I do feel that they've been taking a more careful approach to the city's finances. And I do think that we should have, you know, this money earmarked, you know, like Lucy, I don't think that it shouldn't be like a free for all, but I do think it's important to be careful where those millions of dollars are going. And I'm okay waiting to make sure that those decisions are, you know, to the benefit of the community at large and not just, you know, like, not just like a select few.
I want to bring up because, hold on, Lucia, and then I'll jump to you. Just an added wrench in there, and this might tie into your response, Lucy, but COVID, nobody knew COVID was going to occur. And one of the arguments that the city manager was having was that building up the reserves, because cities, not only Oxnard, cities across the nation had to dip into the reserves, and that to rebuild those reserves, I believe it got down to even 4 million in our reserves, way below what our city's policy has. So again, I'm going to throw that in there. Lucy, go ahead.
Well, I guess my question would be, is if he was going to keep a quarter of it at the first quarter, that should have been up and transparent for the voters to decide, because that is big. That is huge. To wait until the measure passed and then say, hey, we're going to keep the first quarter. That's not what the voters decided. That's the problem that we have with the city, is that the transparency and accountability, now we have to backtrack to be accountable. But I have to disagree with you to the other speaker, because that's not new council members. They have been there over a decade now. So if there is mismanagement and there is everything, that's not new. It's continuous. There's a big difference. So go ahead.
I'll just say real quick, Lucy, city manager did make multiple presentations that the first quarter would go into reserves. And in regards to the city council, there's only, to my knowledge, and Lucy, you would know more than I do because you've been part of the city a little bit longer. Councilman McDonald's the only one that's been over on the council since 2008. All the other council members are relatively new, but you can go ahead and continue with your comments.
Yeah, not most of them, because Bert's been there a minute. Carmen just barely left this year, and that seat was covered. So to say that, you know, Gabe Duran should know, that's impossible. Well, I guess the point is, it's not brand new people sitting there, and it's mismanagement, unaccountable and transparency to the community. I guess that's the number one thing. When we're gonna put money aside and put for the quarter, that means general fund. Plain and simple. I think people need to understand exactly what does that mean, and not so much. I'm not here to tell people like, oh, did you understand it or not understand it? I think that's something that our people as leaders and as city council need to make clear to the voters. That's our job. we have the voters understand the issues we're talking about and why are we trying to sell that issue and how is that voter going to understand it, especially when it comes to with homeowners. These are their tax dollars. And that's a big thing. It's like we have to get the buy-in from the community. And how do you do that? By being transparent.
Elidet, you have a response?
Well, I think that some words are being used that are not all mean the same thing. There's a difference between being transparent, accountability, and the mismanagement. I don't disagree that there has to be some accountability, but to kind of tie in the word accountability to the word mismanagement are two different things. And to say that it's not transparent, that's not fair to say that, because all of that is already public information. They're already putting that information out there. They specifically asked for the community at large to give their opinion, what they prioritize. And I know I had to take that survey. My husband took that survey, and those words don't mean the same thing. So if they want accountability, I agree with that. That doesn't mean that we're asking that we're accusing somebody of mismanagement. And I think that should be a distinction. Asking for accountability is fair to ask because we are the voters. To then tie that into mismanagement with a whole different council, to me, it doesn't seem like it would be the appropriate usage of the word in that instance. So I don't disagree that there has to be accountability. I disagree on the transparency part. And I have not seen on a large scale the mismanagement where there was an FBI raid and all these things that happened with this current sitting council.
It's worth noting to our viewers that the last time back in 2012, the FBI and the DA, or actually no, 2012 or 2010, FBI DA did do a raid requesting information from the city of Oxnard, and had their eyes set on 3 council members at that time who are no longer part of the city, and a city manager who is no longer part of the city as well. I just want to ask in regards to Measure E, Elidet, you mentioned that you took that survey. Lucy, did you happen to take that survey as well?
I took the survey because, like Elidet, I was literally asked to take it. I don't know if that's how her and her husband were asked to also, but that survey in itself was a joke because we have over 200,000 residents. And I think Gabe Turan told me only a percentage, a minuscule percent took that survey. So for the city to base anything off such a small amount of people is really disheartening. That survey should be made more available. It should not have been cut off, and they should not have ran with that survey without giving the opportunity to Oxnard residents. That was a shame.
Okay, we'll go ahead and go on to our next topic. We'll talk about Parks and Rec. Recently, the Mayor Zaragoza at the Finance and Governance Committee had requested that $300,000 be allocated to upkeep and maintenance of parks, and subsequently it was approved at the City Council to do so. Do you believe it's appropriate that we are having to have elected officials allocate money where they technically, the money should already be going towards? Or do you think that this is the appropriate path for council members to kind of push items through? Elidet, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, it's kind of like a good and a bad, right? The parks that needed that money, because it went to the parks that are not funded by like the HOAs or Melrose and stuff like that. It's the parks that did get the funding were the ones that really needed it. So it's kind of like, should we do it this way? But they really need it. And it was like one of those decisions that would this decision have been happening had it not been for COVID? You know, where kids are going to be, you know, they couldn't be in school, but they were encouraged to go outside, but they couldn't play at the park, but they could play at the grass on the playground. And I know I was watching one of Chris Hernandez's video, and he talked about some of the things that they had to fix. And some of the things are safety issues where, children could get injured. And COVID just made it that much harder, that even though when they got the $300,000, there's still a process before they can spend that money and fix what they needed to fix, including like broken fences, a broken playground equipment, or put more of the little, the mulch that's on the playground to make it safer for the kids. Gabe Turan talked about it, why it's important to have that, so if the kid falls, they don't have like a hard impact, and it covers like the cement. So I don't know if it was the most appropriate way to ram that through, but it was one of those decisions that the situation would have been made worse hadn't that not happened. And we're talking about $300,000 that, when you look at where it went or where it's going, it's not even covering a lot, because a lot of these things cost a lot more. I do believe that had it not been for COVID and the funds that were originally there that wouldn't have to have been used other places when emergencies needed it, I don't think the situation would have necessarily happened. But when you do go to the parks, I go to the park a lot, and you see these things falling apart, and they become a health hazard, and they become an issue to the most vulnerable residents that can't even vote yet. I do think that in this situation, it was necessary. However, I can see how, in the wrong hands, these kind of situations could be taken advantage of, and that's what we want to prevent. We don't want this to be the norm. We don't want it to be where people are ramming through things and taking advantage of the voters and these funds. But I think that this bill was important in the situation that it happened.
Lucy, what are your thoughts about that? Do you think the city council and the committees were correct about putting this item and requesting it, or do you think it should have just been something that was already being done by the city through regular maintenance?
I think it should have been done directly by maintenance. That's what we have it for. That's what we have CDBG funds. That's what we have everything. I mean, I think the other speaker needs to be clear when we can't blame COVID for everything. I know our city manager likes to blame COVID for everything, but you can't use it as a blanket for everything. The bottom line is I can't rely on Gabe Turan, Chris Hernandez, Manuel Herrera. I can't rely on their fancy little videos to tell me what's really going on in the city. They did a video at Durley Park, but we already know there may be a possible $8 million grant coming in for that park to fix that. We also know that the old Oxnard High School has a grant of earmarked monies coming to fix that. So we really need to know where the monies are coming in and to fix it. Do we need to have the city council ram things in to get it done? I don't know. That's part of their job. That's part of what they take on as a city leader, to look on issues that they feel is extremely important, and then to bring that item up. Was it good? Yes, it was, but that should already been done. The city always works on something after it's finally brought to their attention. That's why preventative maintenance is important. It's preventative, and that's why it has to keep going. Now, the city should not have stopped the park workers for COVID, because that was the stupidest thing they ever did. So the city should have kept maintaining our parks the way we're supposed to. Maybe instead of buying that fancy robot to come and print numbers and letters, maybe we should have kept the employees on the payroll. That's how I feel.
Elidet, do you have a response?
No, I agree that although we can't blame COVID for everything, you're stuck between a hard rock and a place. We're talking about these issues that killed people, that killed our friends or neighbors in the community, that was targeting essential workers, that was targeting the most vulnerable, that at the time we didn't know that it was going to be out this long. Who could have seen that coming, right? We didn't know that we were thinking a year ahead, that COVID, this situation was going to happen a year ahead, where people are losing their jobs. I lost my job in the middle of the pandemic, right? In the middle of the pandemic, thank goodness that I didn't have to, I was fine, but I saw friends and neighbors not be fine, because it's who could have seen that it was going to last over a year, that these situations were going to last over a year? So it's not about blaming COVID for everything, but COVID really upended a lot of jobs, a lot of, my husband works in the alcohol industry selling alcohol to bars and restaurants. They sell it wholesale, right, to these business owners. He has probably the most secure job in the county, and still they affected their sales and all of those things. It's not about blaming COVID for everything. It's about not being, when we have these budgets and we have an emergency budget, nobody knew that this COVID that affected, the world was going to affect us this much here. And it did. So it's not about blaming it, but it's about looking at the picture as a whole, that yes, COVID had a lot to do with a lot of these issues, because should they have laid people off? Probably not. I don't know, but it was a decision that happened at that time. And parks, we couldn't go to the parks. So where were they putting that money at? It's not a decision that was probably made lightly, and should it have happened. In hindsight, it's easy to say that shouldn't have happened. And I agree, we probably shouldn't have told them to not work, but that's hindsight. We see it now, right? Like, that's hindsight. We didn't know what we know back then in March of 2020.
Let me add this, that and I'm very curious about the responses for this part, is cities across the nation, not just Oxnard, cities in general across the nation, dipped into the reserves, had loss of revenue when businesses were closed, when schools were closed, pretty much our economy destroyed. So revenue wasn't coming in. Cities dipping into the reserves, and some cities even did layoffs. So what would have been the right approach for communities to continue? Now, this is going to be general. This is not just in Oxnard, but this is general. What would have been the correct approach when you're leading the city, you have no revenue stream coming in, or a lack of there because of COVID, and you had to lay off employees that essentially were doing those jobs? What is your approach? What is your recommendation on trying to keep up a routine maintenance with limited staff and limited funding? Lucy.
I think the same thing we already did. The community stepped up and we did it. Exactly that. The community came strong. We started frontline serving. We started serving the essential workers. We were out there. Food share grew massively. The volunteerism, the community input, that it takes a village aspect is the number one thing. I think what the city should not have done was turn around and dip in and then start doing a $7 million, $28 million project. That's probably something the city should not have done. When we know that we have a pandemic going on and we need to check every penny, nickel, and dime, we do not start purchasing items or start building upon. That was the worst thing the city could have did when they started that $27 million project in downtown that now became $38 million. That's it.
Elidet?
Well, I think it's important to see, like, I guess, I don't know if the viewers are watching that, to understand how these budgets work. A lot of the stuff that was bought and purchased that happened at the pandemic, it wasn't something that was approved at that time. It was approved previously. So those are important things to also to remember, that, like, if I get my paycheck and I'm like, okay, this check is going to this, and this happens, it was already allocated. Now, should they have pulled back? And that's a whole different story. I don't know what would have been the good approach. The good approach for me, and like Lucy said, a lot of people step up with their volunteerism. We worked a lot with the farm workers. We didn't take care, I believe, of our essential workers the way we should have. And that's the group that probably suffered the most. That if we would have taken care of the people that are around other people, the grocery store workers, the nurses, instead of sending them a banner that said thank you and really said, hey, this is how we need to take care of you. I had 2 friends that left their profession in the nurse and with working at hospitals because they weren't being taken care of. And guess what happens then? It starts spreading and spreading and spreading. A lot of people that died didn't die necessarily because of COVID. It was because there wasn't enough resources to give them the oxygen and give them all of those things. I feel that if we would have taken care of our essential workers, our teachers, making sure the schools were okay, properly funding our schools would have probably prevented the kids from being out, not in school, people not being able to work. I think that would have helped slow down a lot in the county, because parents who are working, especially, I babysit a lot. I had to watch children that their parents can't work from home, right? They have a job that they can't work from home. So if we're not taking care of the people that are essential to their community, whether it's the farm workers, the nurses, the teachers, the grocery stores, even the people that clean the trash, because that's, all of that, keeping the city nice and clean so the stuff doesn't spread. I think it would have done a lot. But we still have, even when people have to go to work and they can't take sick time and they can't take all of those, it affects everybody else. We pay taxes, so when the community that can't step up, I could volunteer. Not everybody can. I used to clean a house for an elderly person who was disabled. Are we expecting them to volunteer? We can't. Not everybody is going to be able to step up. Some people could step up financially, some people could step up with their bodies and be there. But if we're not taking care of those essential workers, all of this, and we saw what happened, it kept spreading, and the economy had to, they kept closing things down. If we would have taken care of the most essential people, I do think that the economy would have survived a little bit stronger. I did help a lot of businesses with their digital pivot and making sure their online strategies are going. So that's another effort that went, that businesses didn't take advantage of. But if we're not taking care of the people that are around other people, then how can we expect to just go on by our day and be like, okay, well, I'm going to get my nails done, I'm going to get my hair done, I'm going to go shopping. Not everybody has that kind of job.
I want to jump to Lucy before we move into our next topic. Lucy, I saw you shaking your head and made comments of saying no when she was talking about that. Many of the purchases or items that took place during the pandemic were earmarked for that. Your comments on that?
That's not true. They were done during the pandemic. I think you need to really look at city archives, the city council meetings, and you can see that a lot of things that were done during the pandemic. That's why we as city leaders would go up and complain, because they were doing things without community input. And we weren't able to get in, zoom in. It was almost like the voice of the people was silenced. And I'm not the only one that feels that way, but a lot of things were pushed through during the pandemic because there was no city council meetings. So I think that's, you're way off and you're wrong. And it's not fair on the community that we work so hard to make sure that things like that don't happen, but do get pushed in through. So that's really hard. And during the pandemic, I think nobody foreseen it, but we've all lost family. I lost my own father just a couple months ago. So I understand it, but I don't know what your personal life has to do with the city. The city's infrastructure works a different way. There's monies there, there's grants money, there's earmark money, there's PPE monies. So it's totally different from your house to a city. So we have to remember that, how a city works and how a city should work. And you can just look to the neighboring cities and see how theirs worked and how ours didn't. So that's what we have to look at. We have to mirror another city going through the exact same thing, and did they make bad choices like we did? Or if they made worser choices, because that's the only way we have a measurement system. That's the only way we're going to have a measurement system. And nobody ever thought that the homeless was going to double during the pandemic, and it did. So for Oxnard not already having preventative measures for homelessness and for not working on things that were going to help families, real families, during the pandemic, that's where we messed up, because we doubled our homeless. So every city did. So that's like the number one thing. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I'll also just make a comment that there has been city council meetings. Through the new process, they meet twice a month, and every other week is committee meetings for the public. Moving on to our last topic, and now this is a topic that's a little, will make people uncomfortable, but it is a topic that we need to discuss because it is part of this community, and that's with street vending, or in particular the Elidetos. A video had surfaced at the beginning of the year of a city vehicle confronting a Elidetto in South Oxnard. City responded. They recently, at the last city council meeting, had the county, the Ventura County Public Health Department come in and do a presentation and ultimately say that that's technically illegal for what they're doing. So, Lucy, one, I want to hear your thoughts on the incident, but I also want to hear your thoughts on the presentation that was given by the county public health department.
So the incident that happened was disheartening because that's been going on since the dawn of America. That's what people do. So Oxnard had an opportunity where it was presented by the state of California that passed a law that said that residents could do micro kitchens. Oxnard, the city of Oxnard, chose to not support that law. There was a bill passed that said that the state of California, the residents could do micro kitchens. And then it gave a reason, and the county of Ventura has those 30 steps of how you can do it. Now, we know that Carnitas del Rey started that way, you know, and a lot of the La Bonita started that way. So you start doing selling the foods, and then you become so good that you get to open up a restaurant, and then you get to get bigger. So I think the problem with the city of Oxnard not embracing our culture, that's like 65% here in Oxnard, is a disservice to our community and to our gente, because this is who we are. This is what we do. This is what we've known. So they need to find a way. Do they put it as a micro kitchen, or do they put it as a different way? And to have it ignored, just ignored and say like it doesn't, no such wording exists, is another way of saying we're not going to deal with it and we don't want to talk about it and you don't matter.
Your thoughts on the presentation from the county, because they laid it out on the different permitting systems that they have. And unfortunately, Elidetos does not fit in any of that permitting system. So what were your thoughts on that presentation from the county?
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought it was I don't want to cuss, but it was bull. It was bull because it does exist. So they just have to figure out how to make that existable. That's it, because we can sell ice cream and it stays at a room temperature. So we need to figure out a way how to sell the elotes and keep it at a temperature. That's it. That's it. But they're not working with the people. They're not working with the people at all. There's different ways that they can say you can be allocated a corner, you can sell it out of this way, you can do it out of that way, but they're not even being flexible. They're not being flexible because they feel what they've done to the people for so long. You ignore it, you make extreme rules against it, and then hopefully the people just shut up and leave it alone, because that's what we're supposed to do.
Elidet, your response to the incident that took place in South Oxnard, and then your comments in regards to the presentation by the county public health.
Okay, so first with that incident, regardless if they're doing something like they're selling, you should not be running people over with your truck. That I think is just like, you can't do that. It doesn't matter if they were doing something illegal. You can't use your truck as a weapon like that. They were not in danger. They were not endangering somebody's life. So that incident was totally uncalled for. And it's a shame we don't know who did that they want to keep that person private and they're protecting that person. That regardless of the street vendors, that incident should have never happened. Now, as far as street vendors, when it goes, I've done a lot of research because it looks like what is at play here is not the food itself. It's like the safety issue, right? Like the city can't do something because the county sets these health permits that are regulations set by the state. It looks like if they find whoever redesigns the cart that's gonna fit all these requirements is gonna be the person that is gonna find success, because there is a way to do all this that they're asking. But when it comes to elotes, it comes to the corn, what's at play here is not because it's food, it's the type of food. When I go to the ice cream man, all my food is packaged. I am a big supporter of street vendors. My husband is only allowed to buy me from flower vendors. You know, like we see the paletero, we go buy it, we buy elotes. We support them a lot. We know the risk that we're taking when, you know, that they don't have like a hand washing station. It's not kept at a certain room temperature. But also there's a big issue that a lot of people don't understand. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the jarritos that you go to a Mexican restaurant and they have like these little terracotta drinks that you could drink of. Those are full of lead. A similar thing happens with the carts that they use. They oxidize and they release chemicals into the food. And this is what's the issue. It's not the food, it's how it's handled. And I think that LA did a really good job of decriminalizing. And what that means is they stop counting it as a misdemeanor, and sometimes they just fine them. But businesses, when they took away the street vendors, they realized it was hurting their business, because street vendors brought more business to the brick and mortar businesses. It added like another layer of color, so to speak, to the street, right? In Ventura County, it's not a simple solution. It's a $500 million industry. So it's like an informal economy that's going on. The corn and the way that it's handled is the only issue. You see a paletero and ice cream trucks could get a vendor, the food stands could get their permit. It's just the way that the corn is handled. And I do think that there should be a way to fix this, to kind of move with the times and find a way. In 2018, Governor Brown introduced a law called the Safe Sidewalk Vending Act. And one of the things that was there was it encourages the cities to create a permit program for these street vendors. And I think that that's something that we need to get the ball rolling in regards to the corns. You know, they're not going to take away business from restaurants. Who's going to, like buying a $3 corn is not the same as buying a meal at Yolanda's. But if we're not pushing forward for a solution, that does still not give the right to people to harass our street vendors, especially when that person works for the city or works in law enforcement. You can't be running people over with their truck. Like it doesn't give them a ticket to just be harassing our street vendors. I think we all know that the risk we're taking when we buy the food at a street vendor, and I haven't gotten sick yet, so I'm okay.
So I'll just say that based off of that presentation from the county health, one of the things, or there was actually a number of things, but the one that stood out to me was temperature control. The fact that the carts, they're makeshift carts. They're not like state-of-the-art carts. We all seen them. We've all purchased at one time or another from them. There's no temperature control. So the mayonnaise that clearly labeled that after opening you should refrigerate it, it's out there all day. That's a lot of the stuff. There was even a comment from during the presentation where they were saying that they were in the backyard, they were preparing the corn, but it was in these large barrels that just was unsanitary. Is there anything in that presentation that you felt that was inappropriate? And it's worth noting that the city of Oxnard does not enforce those public health things. That's the county. And there was a new directive based off of the manager and the city manager of Oxnard that says that they will no longer confront or, walk up to any of the street vendors. They would actually just note it and pass it on to the county. But at any point during that presentation, was any of that inappropriate, or did you feel that, did it kind of make you think like, okay, maybe this could be a health issue? But again, we all done it. I've done it. my family has done it. You know, it's just the norm. It's, you see that you run to them because it's just some way that they do that corn. It just tastes good. I don't know. I can't describe it. I try to make it at home. It doesn't work. But in that presentation, was there anything inappropriate that made you feel like it's a lie, even though that these are people that are specifically, that's their job. This is what they do. They review these public health laws and they ensure that people stay safe and healthy. Lucy, what are your thoughts on that?
I think they over exaggerated it. They seen a case or two, and yeah, maybe it does happen. But it doesn't mean everybody's doing that. So to turn around and say like, hey, we've seen 1 or 2 people or 3 people doing that, therefore it's a big blanket. The problem with our raza that always happens is that there's always a reason why you can't do this. We couldn't sell ice cream for a while, on the carts. And then so the state turned around and said, okay, now you can sell it out of the little bike. So now everybody started doing the bike and then started adding some chips and stuff because that met the law. So I think it should be the same. Like there is no leeway or any type of incentive to let the people sell. And I think that's the main thing. What are they doing to try to make it sellable? Instead of just saying no, what is the yes? So that's where it comes down to. Like for Oxnard, we have 3 lobbyists. We know we have 3 employed lobbyists. Can the city turn around and ask them to get together with other cities and other counties and go lobby Sacramento and go find out what can we do in our cities that make it possible? I think that would be the best thing. That shows a leap of faith for the people.
How do you deal, Lucy, with the temperature control? Because again, one of the big selling points that the county was making was the temperature control, that there are red zones or danger zones when food either gets below a specific temperature or gets above a specific temperature that can actually, be harmful to the public for consuming.
I think you just do the same old simple thing. Put a great big sticker that says you're eating at your own risk. I mean, that's at your own risk. We all know it. We've all done it. We all still do it. And I am taking my own risk. And I think that's the number one thing. Just put a legal sign that says if you are purchasing, you are eating at your own risk. It is not being regulated by the county. And therefore, you're eating at your own risk. So those are simple things that the county can be working at. If you're going to do that, then you need to be at least registered and then put a sign that says eat at your own risk. But to stop it entirely is a disservice to our people because we're the ones buying and we're the ones that is helping that elefero and helping that flower lady. We're the ones that are trying to help for our people. So that's the bottom line.
Elidet, your response to the comments in regards to the county's presentation, their main points in regards to temperature control, and then what do you believe should be the approach when dealing with temperature control?
I think that I think their concerns were valid, but I think it's over exaggerated fear mongering. In the state of California, we have signs all over these buildings that say enter at your own risk because these things could cause cancer. It's like Prop 65, right? Mm-hmm. And it, like Lucy said, you're eating at your own risk. Why not put a sign that says that is something similar? Because I don't think mayo on corn with mayo and cheese is more of a risk to you than a Big Mac. Just because Big Mac is at a McDonald's and it's regulated, it's probably healthier than a Big Mac. But I do agree with that. Why not do it to a point where let them have that leeway, just like we did with Prop 65. People joke around California, everything causes cancer. And I tell them, you guys have the same things, but they don't tell you that it causes cancer. I live in a building that says, whether it's a new or old building, it's the same thing. It's a warning label. Why not have a similar one for food? I've been eating from Elotero since I was a kid. And I mean, I've never gotten sick I've never had food poisoning or anything like that, and I'm still here.
Okay, final comments. We'll start with Lucy on any of the topics or just in general.
I'd just like to thank you, Daniel, for doing this. And it was nice meeting you, Miss Elidet. Hopefully I'll meet you in person one day. And I just want to remind everybody that Saturday is May Day. There's going to be a caravan in downtown by Cause and so many other organizations out there to bring up the essential workers and to remind people about May Day and why it's so important. In downtown, there's also going to be the Femme Dentistry, and that's all female industry that is going to be right there at Plaza Park, right behind Carnegie. Same time in the afternoon. Go on down there. There's the downtown Oxnard is going to have a lot of things going on. Streets of Vintage is going out there. It's a cute little secondhand swap meet. It's the cutest thing. Good food. Go out and enjoy yourself and enjoy May Day with the family. Oh, and I'll be out there reading at Cuesta with Chris on a Saturday. He's installing a free little library in Cuesta. So I want to thank everybody and thank you and make your vote matter.
Lucy, do you have a website or somewhere where people can go and get that information from?
It's all over Facebook or Instagram. The cause Central Coast Alliance United for a Sustainable Economy is spearing that May Day parade. Chris Hernandez, if you go down to the site, he's spearing the Cuesta reading, or it might be on Oxnard Police Department because they'll be out there also. And the Femme Industry, if you look for Miss Elidet from Q1047, she's out there running the all-women industry.
That's awesome. Elidet, final comments on the three topics or any announcements?
No, those are all fun events. I know we had a plate full, so it was nice meeting you too, Lucy. And there's a lot of great events going on this weekend because of May Day. So I know that there's a lot of hands on deck with that. I do support if you guys could go donate also to the Feed 805 at the Oxnard Police Department. And if you guys send me a picture, I'll give my favorite picture, these 805 balloons that I have back here. But yeah, there's a lot of great events for the community, and being involved is probably one of the most important things we could do as a citizen, regardless of whether we agree or disagree. I know I met a lot of you guys in person, and it's great to see all these events going on. I think City of Oxnard, we should be thankful that of all the issues that they're going on everywhere else, we have our issues. These are the most important issues in our city, because everything else, even though we're not perfect, we don't have a lot of these issues and that other people have, because as you said, Lucy, that when everything went down, the community stepped up. And I think that says a lot about the resilience of the Oxnard citizens. And I really appreciate all the support that the street vendors are getting, the farm workers, the kids with the reading. So I hope you guys could go to some of these events going on. And don't forget to donate to Feed 805 to keep our community fed so they could keep taking care of their families.
Again, thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Elidet, for joining me tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Viewpoint. 3 topics, 2 viewpoints, 1 very interesting conversation. Be sure to join us next week as we have the Code Compliance Manager join us. That's Thursday at 4 p.m. right here on Oxnard Live. Please be sure to share and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Through some changes on Facebook, we now switch to YouTube, which 1, gives you a better quality video, and 2, allows you to rewind the actual live feed. So if we miss something, you can always go back during the actual live feed. Always be sure to visit oxnardlive.net for upcoming guests and to view any of our archive videos. This is Oxnard Live, all live and 100% real.